Hi, my name is Brenton DeBoof. I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of Rhode Island, and this year I'm serving as the Dean of the Graduate School at URI as well. But maybe more importantly for this conversation is I want to just tell you that I'm a devout Christian. That I've feared God for most of my life, and I try to live out the teachings of Jesus every day in my life. And if you're the type of person that does that, you'll also know that that's a lot easier said than done. So today I want to talk from both a perspective as a scientist and as a Christian about kind of a contemporary topic that's getting a lot of discussion in circles of faith, and that is the coronavirus vaccines. So I'm not a YouTuber, by the way. I'm not looking for followers or anything like that. I'm just looking to try to help out people, mostly, honestly, my family and friends that might have some questions about this. I'm just hoping that I can try to help you explain some things, like I said, from both the perspective as a scientist and as a Christian. Just a little bit about me before we get into the science or into the faith end of it. I'm originally, of course, I live on the East Coast now, and I've got letters behind my name, stuff like that, but I promise I'm just a normal guy, right? I grew up, kid you not, on a family farm in Iowa. My parents were actual sharecroppers, right? We just raised a lot of corn, and kind of out there I realized that what I was taught, and I still believe that some of the most important qualities about me are my faith, my family, and my work ethic. Like that's what makes me who I am. And I still apply those to my life now as a Christian and as a scientist. All right, so after earning my PhD, well, I guess I went to Evangel College. It's the Assemblies of God's Liberal Arts College in Springfield, Missouri. Then I got my PhD in St. Louis, Missouri at Washington University. Was in New York City for a couple years at Columbia University, and now I've been at URI for 15 years. What's kind of interesting about URI, just kind of fortunate in this case, is that URI is literally located right in between Pfizer and Moderna, two of the leading firms that have made these the coronavirus vaccines that are being distributed throughout the U.S. All right, and so Pfizer is in Groton, Connecticut. It's 45 minutes from where I am right now in my office here. I used to go down to Pfizer to their main research headquarters there in Groton and teach classes on their main campus, right? And so I taught a lot of their scientists about organic synthesis and organic chemistry. And so I've got lots of former students who are employees at Pfizer. And then I have one former student who used to work in my lab, just like in that last picture that I showed, who is now an employee at Moderna. And so I got to admit, I've kind of followed the development of some of these vaccines, partly because it's just really cool science, and partly because I know some of the people who work for the companies that are doing this. And so, that's been kind of interesting for me, both for a scientific and as a personal story as well. Okay, so let's just jump into this really quickly. Okay, I'm not going to try to bore you with lots of science, and so we'll kind of skip all the details in the middle here, but just the big idea is what we're after is immunity, right? Anytime you have a disease, some foreign invader comes into your body, in this case, it's the spiky ball we've all seen, the SARS-CoV-2 virus particle, comes into your body, presumably through lung tissue, and then a lot of stuff happens. Don't worry about it. You may have heard of cytokines and cytokine storms and stuff like that, but lots of stuff happens. And at the end of the day, after about 6 or at least 6 days, is kind of what it says on the x-axis, you may not be able to see it here, you form these Y-shaped molecules, and those are called antibodies. Anytime you have been sick and you have recovered from the disease, it is because your body made these molecules right here. The key to this whole thing is that we have to get immunity, and we get immunity by getting antibodies. And the only way to get antibodies is to be challenged with the disease itself, or almost the only way. Okay, so then the other term you hear is herd immunity, right? Where everybody gets immune, okay? And so just the idea is the disease is spread, right? So if red dude right here is infected, the disease, as he interacts with other people, he's gonna get more people infected, right? But if red dude is surrounded by green dudes, the people that are immune, he cannot spread the disease, or statistically it becomes much harder for him to spread the disease. So maybe that's the first point I wanna make here, is that this is an example of where there's community action that's necessary, right? If we want to eradicate the disease, and that absolutely is the goal, I want no one to get sick from COVID again, right? If we want that to happen, the only way it'll happen is if we get this herd immunity. The community has to become immune. So there's two ways that can happen. One is kind of the old-fashioned way, is if everybody gets sick. The survivors will have those antibodies and will be immune. Okay, now maybe the virus will mutate. There's questions about how long immunity lasts, but if you have had COVID, really COVID, not just you think you had the sniffles back in February or something like that, if you really had COVID, you now have antibodies, and you obviously you're watching this, you survived, so you now have antibodies, you have a level of immunity to the disease, right? You are one of these green people. that can help slow the spread. Okay? The other way, kind of the trickier way, is if we can get, by the way, it takes about 70% of the people just kind of statistically to slow the spread down to where it basically just, quits spreading. Okay? The other way is if somehow we could get people like the immunity without actually giving them the virus. If there was some magical way of doing that, that would be amazing, right? That way, because quite frankly, the first way, right, the one I just grayed out there, like if that happens, like we can talk about death rates and all this kind of stuff, right? Like if you look at the numbers, the death rate is about 2% or the death mortality rate, infection mortality rate, whatever you want to call it, is about 2% of the people that have been diagnosed with COVID have died, right? That number used to be 6%. Now, and of course, you hear that for some people it's 99.9%. That's only in certain fragments of the population, right? So if we just were to let the disease run rampant, like millions of people would die, right? And so if we don't want that to happen, we have to have some other way of giving the population immunity, right? And that's what a vaccine is, right? So, but I know vaccines have been controversial for a long time, and for the past couple decades, been really controversial, particularly in the Christian church. Quite frankly, there's a lot of data that shows that anti-vaccination and vaccine hesitancy is much higher for evangelicals than for the general population. So that's why I want to talk to you about some of this stuff. Okay, but so how are old-fashioned vaccines made? Like, odds are, if you're watching this, you have received the MMR vaccine. You've received lots of vaccines. How are these things made? Quite frankly, the techniques for doing it was way out of date. I kid you not, you may see it in the picture here, they're made in chicken eggs. Like there are farms that grow chicken eggs for the express purpose of creating every year's flu vaccine. Okay, it's kind of complicated, but in essence, you inject a chicken egg with a vaccine or with a virus, and basically you see how the egg does. If it dies, well, then it's not doing very well. If it survives, well, then it must have been a weakened form of the virus. And so then you can take literally the goo out of the egg and inject it into people and into patients, and they will have immunity as a result of that. I know it's kind of crazy to think. So by the way, all the allergic reactions, all the need for preservatives that we've had through the years in vaccines, why is that? It's because it came from an egg. Literally an egg. Like you could eat it for breakfast or you could make it into a vaccine and inject it into people. And so some people are allergic to eggs, right? And we have to have preservatives because the vaccine's literally made out of eggs. And so like that was the only way we had up until recently to do this. Okay, so now the other thing I want to talk about is what is the virus? And what is this mRNA technology that we always hear about, okay? So the virus, you've seen it's a spiky ball, right? And so the bad stuff's on the inside. Basically, this is what makes you sick, and this is what spreads. It's the viral's genetic material, or the virus's genetic material. On the outside is what's called the spike protein. The spike protein doesn't make you sick, right? It is just the mechanism by which the virus gets into cells, all right? And so that spike protein, very early on, we knew the sequence, or we could create the spike protein. We knew the sequence of amino acids that string together to make the spike protein. All right? And so, yeah, like I want to make that clear. Bad stuff on the inside, spike protein on the outside does not make you sick. Okay? So here's the big idea. The big idea is that if we could give your body the spike protein, but only the spike protein, we could, let me go back, just say that. If we could give your body this molecule, we could inject it into you, your body would think that COVID was there even though it wasn't. Your body would generate a bunch of those antibodies, those Y-shaped molecules. It would create a bunch of those Y-shaped molecules to recognize the spike protein, and they would kill it. And anything else that looked like it, it would kill. Okay, and so the next time your body saw a spike protein, maybe it was because you actually got infected, it would kill the virus right away. You wouldn't even be sick for a day. So that's the big idea. And so you can imagine we could create a vaccine by growing a ton of virus. Sounds like a bad idea, right? But we could grow a ton of virus. We could cut up the protein or cut up the virus and then extract out the spike proteins and inject those into people. We absolutely could do that. Your body would then create antibodies to those spike proteins. Turns out it's just difficult to do. No one wants to make truckloads of virus, right? And so there's a better way, and this is what's really cool. So this is so much better than the old egg way of making vaccines, right? And that is the idea, the analogy I want you to think of is a printer, okay? Everybody here has used a printer before, right? Like what you do is you type something up on Microsoft Word and you send it through a wire to the printer, or maybe even over there to the printer. What goes to the printer? Does the paper? No, code, goes to the printer, right? A series of ones and zeros goes to the printer, and then out pops the actual piece of paper, the printed document that you composed. The same is true in your body. And literally everybody, or everything that's living, every blade of grass, every piece of fungus, every tulip, they all have printers in every cell, okay? And those printers make proteins, okay? And so just the same way, and so yeah, what the code is called mRNA, right? It's code for making proteins, right? And so very early on, we knew what the code was that could make the spike protein. So instead of growing tons of virus, chopping it up, purifying it, and injecting that spike protein into you, what we can do is we can just give the code for the spike protein, and the printer that's inside you, by the way, it's called a ribosome. It will take the code and it will print the spike protein. Remember, the spike protein doesn't make you sick, but suddenly you'll have spike protein inside you, and your antibodies will form on it. And anytime they see it again, they'll kill whatever cell has it, right? Namely the virus, or kill the virus that has it. Okay, the same thing early on. So by the way, I'm just a nerd in every sense of the word. I now have 3 3D printers in my basement just because I'm nerdy, right? Like I have a nerdy job, and then I have nerdy hobbies too. So early on, I was able to see what the code for the spike protein was. This is just a screenshot from my computer, and then I printed it with my 3D printer. It's an Ender 5, if anyone wants to know. All right, so this is me in the middle of the print. I'm printing it, and then sure enough, at the end, I have a copy of the spike protein that came only from code. Your body can do the same thing, and that's the trick that the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines do. By the way, I always use Moderna and Pfizer, and you hear everybody does, use them synonymously. Basically, the two companies, because the code was public knowledge, the two companies then ran out and invented the same thing at the same time. So the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are practically the same thing. They're almost interchangeable. The J&J one is a little bit different. That's just come out. I don't have data on that. It's a little more complicated what's going on with it, but it's the same idea. Basically, it's tricking your body into making the spike protein. You never get COVID or the coronavirus when you take the vaccine, right? I mean, everyone always complains about that with the flu vaccine. Some of these old egg-based vaccines, they say you get sick from the vaccine. That does not happen here, right? You do spike a little bit of fever, that's your immune response, but you are not getting COVID, you are not getting the flu, or whatever, you're not getting the disease from the vaccine, because the vaccine doesn't even contain the disease. It doesn't, it's just that little strip of code is all it is. Okay, so what else is in there? It's basically the strip of code, and then we have to package it in fat, right? And so it's code buried in a little bit of fat. All right, and that's what's being injected into you, okay? It does turn out that just for storage reasons, that fat code complex, mRNA complex has to be kept pretty cold in order to keep it intact. And so that's why you hear about these things having to have this cold storage requirements and stuff. But yeah, so it's packaged in fat, and it's mRNA. These are totally normal molecules, right? Like absolutely normal molecules that are, like I said, it's fat molecules. And one of the key components is cholesterol, believe it or not. Right? Don't worry, you're not going to get high cholesterol from the COVID vaccines. But yeah, like it's just normal molecules like that occur in nature that are now in your body, right? And it's not a problem to be taking these things. Okay. So yes, but it does turn out that the lipids, the fats, might be the reason for some of the allergic reactions we've heard about. Scientists are on this. There is one lipid that contains a molecule called PEG, polyethylene glycol. Go look in your shampoo bottle. I guarantee it's in your shampoo as well, right? This is a normal molecule that is used widely in kind of modern society. And so, but it does turn out that scientists are kind of suspecting right now that may be the cause of some of the allergic reactions. But I want to put all that allergic reaction in perspective, by the way. Just to say, so back when I first pulled this data, it was back in like December, it was like right after Christmas, where we had only given out 2 million doses of the vaccines at the time. And of those 2 million doses it gave out, we had 8 allergic reactions, right? Now, of course, we're giving out 2 million a day. But I just want to kind of put that 8 out of 2 million in perspective, right? Peanuts have an allergy prevalence of allergy to peanuts in kind of the general population is about 1 to 1.5%. So take 1 to 1.5% and compare that to 8 out of 2 million, right? So I just want to be really clear about that. Peanuts are way more dangerous to the general population than the coronavirus vaccines. Okay, just I had to make that clear, right? That's no joke. That's just what the data shows us. Oh, nuts. All right, and I do want to just show you one piece of data here, just to show, are they effective? This is the data from the Pfizer clinical trial. So Pfizer gave 43,000 people either a placebo, like a fake vaccine, or the real vaccine. All right, and then they turned them loose in the general population, and then they saw who got sick. Okay, the blue line, so the x-axis here is time, days after the dose was given. It goes out to about 119 days it was. And then the y-axis is kind of like incidence of COVID. Okay, the blue line, turns out they just see who got sick, and then they look back and they're like, oh, did you have the vaccine or did you have the placebo? Of course, the people don't know, but it turns out pretty much everybody that got sick had placebo. The people that got vaccinated for 11 days had a chance of getting sick, and then it basically plateaus out. Okay? So that's the point, is by the way, if you have the vaccine, you still need to wear a mask for at least 11 days, right? It takes a little while for that immune response to get going, for your antibodies to get formed. But after that, you don't get sick. And if you didn't get the vaccine, you've got a great chance of getting sick, right? Okay, so that's enough of the science. I hope I showed you what's going on with the vaccines. And you know, are they safe and effective? I hope I explained that. Like I said, I'm not a YouTuber, I'm a busy guy, but if you have some other questions, you can always Google me and probably find me that way. But you could leave comments in the YouTube you know, comment section or something. Like I said, I'm busy, but I'll try to answer questions. That's what I'm trying to do here, is trying to help. Okay, so just from the perspective of a Christian, I want to say that, I know you're kind of seeing a sun setting, so there's glare here, but I just said science versus faith is a false dichotomy. All right, so I'm both a scientist and a Christian, and that's not wrong, right? You know, to say that I love God and love to follow, or try my hardest to follow the teachings of Jesus, is what it means to be a Christian, right? To say that I love to kind of discover things and study things really hard, and you know, think hard about complex topics, that's kind of what it takes to be a scientist, and those two are not opposites. In fact, there's actually a lot of Christians that are scientists. Like I said, I think that the idea that it's always faith versus science, that's just wrong, right? Like that's not true. There's the actual, you know, faithful people in the sciences, the percentage of them are about the same as they are in the general population. There's a lot of people like me who are Christians and scientists. I want to give you one example. You'd have to live under a rock in the U.S. to not know who Anthony Fauci was right now. This is Anthony Fauci's boss. His name is Francis Collins. He's the top biomedical scientist in the country, or in the United States, right? He was the director of the Human Genome Project. And now he's the director of the National Institutes of Health. Like I said, it's Anthony Fauci's boss. He is the top guy for biomedical science in the U.S., if not in the world. This is the first book that he wrote, called The Language of God, where he shares his testimony about how he came to faith in Christ. And he's a sincere, devout believer. He's written a couple other books. I highly recommend his books. I'm reading one right now. His most recent book is called Belief. I'm reading it right now. He also runs a website, and it's called biologos.org. If you're the type of person that is interested in kind of this intersection of faith and science, I cannot recommend that website enough. I will say, don't go there and, you know, hoping to get zingers, right? Like go there to think seriously and hard about some of these topics. And there's a lot of great material there. Okay? So yeah, so if there was some kind of collusion between faith and scientists, and, you know, all these scientists were having Friday afternoon conference calls to promote global warming and keep faith down, right? This guy would be leading the conference calls, right? And he's a faithful Christian. I would be in there, and I'm a faithful Christian too, right? That's not the way it works. Okay? All right. I guess I want to leave you with a couple Bible verses about this. I got to admit, I get a little frustrated sometimes, and I try to be loving. I try to, to lead with the temperament of Christ. But when I feel like there's a strain of anti-intellectualism within our church, and that's frustrating to me because there's entire books of our Bible dedicated to wisdom. Right? So I'm just giving you, obviously Proverbs, right? A verse from Proverbs, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. I guess I want to point out that, wisdom is something that's found. It doesn't just come easy. You're not going to get it from internet memes. You're not going to get it from YouTube videos. I understand the irony that I'm making a YouTube video right now. It's going to take hard work, and it's going to take thinking very hard, serious conversations about things, right? But we should be leading those conversations as Christians. We should be at the forefront of exploring God's creation and the forefront of trying to help their community, right? And yeah, that's going to take wisdom, and that's going to be hard to do. It's not, like I said, it's not going to be simple stuff, but it's something that we should engage in. All right, and then I want to take a verse from the New Testament. You know it. When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? What did he say? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. We know that to be true. And we're great at preaching that, but you know there's more to the verse if you're a Christ follower. It's with all your mind. So I want to just point out that Christianity, that faith in Christ, is not just about belief. It's an intellectual pursuit as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like Christ even commanded us with the greatest commandment that we could love God through our intellect. I guess I want to challenge you to not just, not just accept everything at face value. I want you to think hard about things. I want you to ask serious questions, right? And look for data. Look for things look for things that are real, not just things that you heard on the internet. Okay. Oh, you can't see it. Like I said, the sun's setting and it's glaring. Right here is one word, and it says engage. That's what I hope we can come out of this, right? That's what I want Christians to do, is I want us to engage in the scientific discourse. I don't want us to just be critical. I don't want us to just be on the outside looking in. I want us to engage, right? I hope that you are training your kids to become scientific thinkers, right? Not to think that it's the enemy. I mean, if that's the case, we're never going to have Christian doctors, right? We're never going to have Christian scientists, right? I'm scared that that's going to die out, right? I want us to engage with this. Okay, so if I can leave you with a few things, like I said, it's that word engage that's all blurred out by the sun right now. I want to leave you with the fact that the mRNA vaccines are cleaner than those old egg-based conventional vaccines. These vaccines are actually better than the ones you got as a kid. They really are, right? They don't have huge allergic reactions. Like we said, peanuts are more dangerous than the coronavirus vaccines, right? And they're highly effective. You saw the charts, right? If you didn't get the vaccine, if you got placebo, you had a great chance of getting COVID. If you got the vaccine, you had the chance of getting COVID for 11 days, and then it just plateaus out. And you're immune. You're one of the green dudes. And I want to remind you of that too. Remember that picture of herd immunity, right? This kind of is the type of thing that only works if everyone does it. And I know that kind of sounds scary. I get that. But it also sounds like we're taking care of our community. We're loving our fellow man by protecting the whole community, by becoming one of the immune people. All right? Other things, like I said, it's safe because they don't even give you the virus, right? And so it's impossible to get COVID from the vaccine. That's not even a thing. It couldn't happen, right? And then, like I said, I know that I'm not a YouTuber, but I am making a YouTube video, and I'm telling you to literally not believe stuff you see on YouTube. Ask someone you know. Don't believe stuff that you just see in a meme or on a post, right? I mean, for all you know, that might be the modern equivalent of the National Enquirer saying there's some alien abduction or something, right? Ask someone you know, like your doctor, maybe someone who is wise, right? If you know someone who remembers the polio epidemics, ask them what it's like and if it was a good idea to get the polio vaccine back then. Ask your doctor or ask a nurse or a family friend that you may know. I want to show the example of that. This is my cousin Lisa. Lisa is a doctor in my hometown in Iowa. Right, and Iowa had a pretty bad outbreak back in the late summer, early fall. And so Lisa dealt with lots and lots of COVID patients. Luckily, she did not catch COVID through the process. And here she is getting the vaccine. She was one of the first people in Iowa to get the vaccine, right? This is back in December when this happened. She got the second dose. She did spike a fever the night after she got the second dose, but she's fine, right? And now she's one of those green people in that picture, right? She's immune, right? She's helping the community become immune to the disease, helping the community eradicate the disease, okay? And I also want to say, she's a good Christian girl, right? She's just like you and me. She believes in God. She wants to help others. She's literally doing God's work by helping heal the sick. Let's be supportive of people like that. Okay, so then I finally, just one last note I want to leave you with. I think how cool is that printer that I showed you, that ribosome that's in your body? It's in the body of every piece of broccoli, every cell of broccoli too. This is how the world works. This is how life works. How cool is that? I just want to say that just makes me think that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to try to keep helping.